Hello, boys and girls. Mr. Palast here. We're getting back to reading more about fairy tales. And remember, in a fairy tale, it's a fictional story, and there's always a moral at the end of the story. And the moral is the message or the lesson that the author is trying to teach you going forward in your lives. Okay? And this one is from our big book, Classic Fairy Tales by the Brothers Grimm, and it's Little Red Riding Hood. All right. In a little cottage on the edge of the woods, there lived a little girl with her mother. She was loved by all for her cheerful, curious, sweet nature. The little girl, of course, had a name of her own, but because she always wore a red cloak with a hood, a present from her beloved grandmother, people had started calling her Little Red Riding Hood, and the nickname pleased her so much that she adopted it. She was wearing her little red cloak when her mother gave her some bad news. Your grandmother will not be able to come visit as she had promised you, my darling. Nothing serious has happened, but your grandmother has a bad cold, so she has to stay in bed. She will not be able to get up for a few days. She has to rest. But how will she manage? Who will cook for her? Who will help her? The little girl asked. Let me go. I beg you, Mama. I could stay with Grandma for a few days and keep her company. I don't know. You'll have to go through the woods. You must be very careful, said her mother anxiously. I'll be careful. I promise, said the little girl. All right, her mother said. Take this basket with you, but please follow the path. Little Red Riding Hood promised her mother that she would be careful. Then she took the basket with a fruit tart and left. Immediately she forgot all her mother's advice. The forest was looking so lovely that day. The birds were singing and the squirrels were jumping from one tree to another. They amused the girl so much that she started following them. In no time at all, Little Red Riding Hood found herself in the middle of the forest, the home of one of the most feared animals of the woods, the wolf. The wolf could hear Little Red Riding Hood laughing from afar and decided to investigate. He made his way through the bushes, saying to himself, A little girl in the middle of the forest? She must have gotten lost. No one from the village ever comes here. Bad for her and good for me. I'm about to have a delicious little meal. And as he said this, he came out of his hiding place, walking towards her, and asked her with a sinister smile, Hello, little girl. What is your name? And what are you doing in this part of the forest? I'm Little Red Riding Hood. I'm going to visit my grandmother who's ill. On hearing her reply, the wolf began toying with the idea of gobbling up both Little Red Riding Hood and the grandmother. But to do this, he would have to get to the grandmother's house before Little Red Riding Hood. There he would attack the grandmother and then wait for the granddaughter to arrive. But first, he had to get rid of the girl for long enough to reach the grandmother's house. The wolf flashed his long, sharp teeth beneath his whiskers, then asked the girl, Wouldn't you like to take her flowers, too? There are very pretty flowers not far from here, the wolf lied. I love flowers. They would be perfect to cheer my grandmother. Little Red Riding Hood replied excitedly, Wolf, please tell me where I can find them. Continue along the path, until you get to a waterfall, the wolf explained, telling the girl a much longer way along the main road so as to give himself enough time to reach the grandmother's house before her. Thank you. You are much kinder than people say, Little Red Riding Hood replied, as she set off in the direction indicated by the animal. Good girl. Go into the forest while I run to get your grandmother's house. The wolf thought to himself, watching the girl until she disappeared behind a big oak tree. When he was sure that Little Red Riding Hood would not be turning back, the wolf leapt for joy. Then he made his way in the opposite direction and ran through the forest to the grandmother's house. Arriving there well before Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf laughed. He had made it in time for his plan to succeed. He knocked at the door, clearing his throat, and then imitating the little girl's voice, he said, It's me, Grandma, Little Red Riding Hood. Little one, you have to come to visit me? Come in, my dear. The door is open. And the wolf went in, leapt on the bed, and gobbled up the grandmother in a single mouthful. Then he lay down in the grandmother's bed, having put on her clothes, her bonnet, and her glasses. Oh, that tricky wolf. As he expected, Little Red Riding Hood soon arrived. When she knocked on the door, the wolf imitated the grandmother's voice, asking, who is it? It's me, Little Red Riding Hood, the girl replied. What a lovely surprise, my dear. Do come in and say hello to your grandmother. The little girl pushed the door open, walked to the bed, and said, Grandma, you look strange to me. What big eyes you have. All the better to see you with, my dear, the wolf replied. And what big ears you have. All the better to hear you with. And what a big mouth you have. All the better to eat you with. Rah! The wolf shouted, leaping on the little girl. And in no time at all, no trace remained of Little Red Riding Hood. Some say that this was the end of the story. The wolf, feeling full, left the cottage and walked contentedly into the thick of the woods. But others say, while the wolf was snoring in the grandmother's bed, a hunter passed by the cottage. Hearing the noise and went in, he saw the wolf fast asleep with his belly bloated. So he took out his knife and was about to attack when the animal's belly suddenly moved. He cut open the wolf's stomach, and to his surprise, Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother jumped out, terrified, in a sorry state but safe and sound. They embraced each other, then thanked the hunter sincerely. I had given up all hope of anyone being able to save us, the grandmother said, deeply moved. I had been trying to catch this wolf for a long time, the hunter replied. Today is a very special day for me. Now I can go home. And saying so, the hunter hoisted the heavy corpse of the wolf onto his shoulders and walked slowly home, leaving Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother to celebrate with a slice of fruit tart and plenty of cuddles. All right. So that's Little Red Riding Hood, and I'll give you guys a little bit of wait time. I want you to tell me, what is the moral of the story? What is the message or the lesson the author is trying to teach you? Okay. The moral of the story
is never talk to strangers, okay? I hope you like the story, Little Red Riding Hood. So many more fairy tales to share with you, and I'm excited to do so. All right, boys and girls, I'll see you soon.